We don't suck.
Definitely. Even if nobody's listening, we're going to go all the way to 10, just on principle alone.
Yeah, because there's a number out there we have to beat. We're not competitive at all.
I'm not going to be one of those failure podcasts. I can't even make it to 10. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of our Tech Tea podcast with McLean Forrester. I am Heather McLean. Happy to be with you here today.
I am Larry McLean. I'm also happy to be here with you today. We're at episode 2. Can you believe we've made it this far?
Yeah, they say a lot of podcasts don't even make it to 10 episodes. So we're going to make that, though. We're going to break that record for sure.
How about if we suck the whole time? We'll still go there because we're that determined.
Definitely. Even if nobody's listening, we're going to go all the way to 10, just on principle alone.
Yeah, because there's a number out there we have to beat. We're not competitive at all.
I'm not going to be one of those failure podcasts. I can't even make it to 10. So,
yeah, that would be yeah. I won't say bad things because you never know, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to start this episode with our current events, and I think you're up first.
Yeah, so a really cool thing came out from the ChatGPT crowd. They have a limited release of a new voice capability, which is a little bit like what you might have on your Apple phone with Siri, where you can talk to ChatGPT, it thinks a little bit, and then it gets back to you with a response. Pretty cool. I was playing with it a little bit this week. I think it'd be great next time we travel anywhere where they don't speak English. Would really be cool to use it as a translator, just to understand what other people are saying to us, and maybe even try to say it right back to them. But I think that'd be fun to play with. I wish I would have had that the last trip we took overseas.
Yeah. I wonder if people get confused though, because there are apps today that you can converse with.
Sure.
It's different, right? I mean,
this is different. This is like using ChatGPT on your computer where you're asking it questions and you're giving it tasks, but it can do it all verbally. And so kind of cool if you're on the move. A lot of times I'm in my car and I'm driving and I have a thought and I've said to myself, well, it'd be great to just ask ChatGPT that. So now I can kind of do that voice, hands-free as I'm driving. That'd be cool. I'm going to play with it more and more, and we'll see how good it is.
And the root of it's generative AI, which is the difference maker.
Sure. Right.
That's very cool. Because you said so, I downloaded that app on my phone. I haven't even had a chance to even touch it yet, but I want to because it's quite interesting. All right. The second item, quite interesting. So the EU has come out with, and I'm going to read some of this, so apologize. It's the AI Act, the European Union AI Act. If you remember back, the EU were the first ones to come out and really standardize, govern, put laws around data, right, and the use of data and collecting data on citizens. Now they've kind of pivoted and they're looking forward to AI, right? And I think this is extremely cool. It's the first comprehensive AI regulation. So anyone doing business in the EU, anyone who's leveraging AI and has it available in the EU, this all applies to them. Some of the key parts, though, I thought were interesting is it categorizes all systems, AI-based systems, on their potential risk, which, again, they're protecting their citizens.
Yeah.
The unacceptable risk is like the first category, and that's the one that's going to come into effect on February 2nd of 2025.
That's soon.
Yeah, it is. That's not, to react. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
What do they call unacceptable risk?
So it's systems posing threats to people's safety, livelihoods, and rights, right? So if you're going to impact people, yeah, exactly. So that includes social scoring, manipulation of human behavior. We'll touch on that in a second. I think that's a discussion point. And most uses of real-time biometric identification in public spaces. So manipulation of human behavior.
Yeah, you could make a case that some social media apps do that now. So.
Right. And then what's the definition? Does that leave it to a little bit of subjectiveness? Is how stringent are you going to make the rules and clarify what is, manipulation of human behavior? If you subscribe to a specific feed and it's measuring what is it you like and it keeps feeding you that, does that qualify?
I don't know. We'll see. I think I'm really interested to see how do they enforce this. What are the controls they're going to put around that? As always, EU is kind of leading the way in these things. So we'll watch and learn as this plays out in 2025.
They do not shy away from rules, do they? I like it. I mean, it needs to be done. Everyone talks about it, but they talk about it for years
Yeah.
instead of actually doing something. The EU just jumps in and says, no, we'll do that. The transparency, I like the other one too. One of the other big keys to it is AI generated content has to be labeled as such. So that's a big controversy right now in social media and deep fakes, things like that. So they're putting laws around it.
I think that's great. I want to know. I think many people want to know when they're interacting with an AI and when content's been generated that way. So,
I like it. I like it. I
all right.
applaud them.
Oh, I did notice you had some interesting new event, current event intro music. That was cool.
Yep.
Little
I dug through and I actually did some generative AI to create the image
the little
and
gnome,
yeah. So I dig it. And the fanfare, it's
the
got to be fanfare when it's current events. So
current event
I like
gnome.
it.
I like that. All right. So today's episode, it's kind of a part one of two. We're going to talk a little bit about organizational agility. So, what does that even mean? Why is it important? How do you get there? How does that relate to your IT, your systems portfolio? And I know, Larry, this is an area that is a little bit near and dear to you. I know you enjoy this topic.
I do. I do. Because, you've heard me say it before, and the readers, listeners, whoever is are going to continuously hear me say it, is we're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. There's so much changing with data and AI and the capabilities, the processing power, cloud services. There's so much that's happening in this time right now. Everyone wants to jump aboard. Everyone wants to take advantage of it. But a lot of organizations can't because they don't have that organizational agility, right? I do love this topic.
So, why is it? I think it'd be important to have agility just to respond to the changing times. You can think of a lot of use cases where companies didn't, and then they went out of business. So, it seems to me like it would be a key component of growth, success. Continuing to stay relevant in the market.
Absolutely. There's so much change and so much evolving right now. It's totally a time of change. So if you aren't postured with your IT portfolio, your application portfolio to be able to pivot, then you're going to be stuck almost like on a set of railroad tracks going in a direction that you can't change from because of technical debt and all of those things that really are inhibitors to change, agility, and all those things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when here in a few minutes.
So how does organizational agility relate to your IT systems? Because that's, I think, the focus area we want to get into today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes back to, and you said it a couple of minutes ago, which comes back to, okay, well, if I have systems in my portfolio, what can I do about those? How can I now change and pivot and understand what needs to be done next? Organizationally, if you want to pivot, I say 45 degrees. If the CEO comes in and says, pivot 45 degrees because there's this new opportunity for us to make money, can we go get that? And honestly, with a lot of systems and the technical debt, you can't. You just can't get there.
I would think.
The
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say I would think you'd want things to maybe be a little bit more modular, a little bit more componentized, so that you can kind of plug and play different things as you need to within your environment, within your capabilities. What do you think?
Modularity is key.
Yeah.
You're right. Modularity is key because much data, the whole data evolution has been transpiring now for the last 5 years or so of understanding the value of data and getting to a place where we can utilize central repositories of data, understand what data is common across your enterprise, get to master data and reference data, so that therefore everyone's talking from the same taxonomy, all systems are using the same data. That makes for greater speed. Now you repeat that for the systems that you're building. Instead of these large monolithic systems where you say, okay, well, let's make this change, and the people who maintain it realize of how tightly coupled everything is within that system, and they say, okay, yeah, it'll be about $1 million in 2 years' time. I can make that change for you.
Yeah, that's
How well
common.
does that work?
I've run into that so many times, especially working in the Department of Defense space.
I think it's resident in the commercial sector too, wouldn't you say? I mean, you've experienced that there as well.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, because companies invest, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars into these systems, and they might have done that 20 years ago. And it's kind of built up over time and been sustained over time. And it does what it was supposed to do 20 years ago, which doesn't mean it's great, it's compatible with how things need to work today. So those things need to be modernized and compartmentalized so that you can use them in the future and for what they bring to the table.
That's that's really important what you just said, is because those systems were built for purpose once upon a time,
Mhm.
and they were built well and for a good purpose, and they fit the need at the time that they were needed. But with the technology changes and everything that's happened over the last 10, really 20 years in data processing, AI, now you now have a different value proposition. So it's time to relook at those monolithic systems and the way they're built and understand the code behind them and say, is there a better way? Because
Right.
before there really wasn't. Now there kind of is.
About 12 years ago, I was doing some capabilities based IT portfolio management with the government, and we tried to sort through hundreds of systems as we were trying to figure out what each system did, which systems really needed funding, how to prioritize that, how to prioritize when systems wanted money to do new things versus what capabilities we might already have in the portfolio. And it was super hard because you didn't have a lot of data to back that up. You had very high level architecture diagrams, if that. You had capability statements, functionals who would tell you what the system did, but it was really hard to sort through
How
any of that stuff.
detailed, when they would say how that's what the system did, how detailed was that?
Well, it's not very detailed, but they would fight tooth and nail that it was critical, right? And they couldn't live without whatever it did, and that probably was true. But it really it brought them to a point where they were like very ingrained and very wedded to that system, and it was hard for them to pull above, kind of rise above, and look across the portfolio, because that's not how the system was designed. That's not how the processes work as far as funding and acquisition. So it makes kind of like creates its own problem where people get really wedded to these systems.
I think in putting myself in the position of like a program manager or someone who's responsible for a system, for capability, and you think, okay, this system was built for purpose, it does a good job, and there's really nothing particularly wrong with it. And I have my funding, I have sustainment, I have a good relationship with the people who are maintaining it.
Right.
And now, without any data to back it up, without any master plan per se, someone comes in and says, hey, we need you to make some cuts. We need you to become more efficient. We need you to use cloud services or things, that are the buzzwords today. And you haven't been trained for that. You're not really sure what that means. You've inherited a system that the code is 20 years old. No one really knows on your team exactly what that code does. You just know overall it's a good system. It functions for purpose, and it's pretty good at it. So why upset my apple cart?
Right. And programs aren't funded really to make huge sweeping changes. Normally that would have to be separate and additional funding, which is hard to fight for when you've got capabilities also that you want to build new things that compete with that. So it's a tough problem for many organizations.
I
But
think. Go ahead. No, I think this dialogue is very important because that's why we're doing this episode in particular, is the struggles you're having as a portfolio manager, giving fact-based direction to and decisions to systems that exist within your portfolio. What's your believability, right?
right,
If you don't have necessarily believability with something factual backing it up, it makes for a great challenge in convincing the herd that we need to pivot left. We need to start doing things differently. You need to give up a piece. You need to give up a piece. You need to give up a piece. And there's fear in that. And so what piece am I giving up and why? And if there's no real sound answer and a great clear vision with data to back it up, that makes for a challenge.
right. And I'm excited because the next episode we're going to talk about some newer tools that are out there now that will give us the data to make those decisions in a really good and healthy way. But I'm
If
more interested right now, like to hear about what if you could be a genie for a day and come up with the ideal IT portfolio, what would that look like? What would be those characteristics that you would hope it would have?
Okay, so I have, as you are thankfully putting the ball in the tee for me, I've come up with a new term. It's called ARES, ARES. And the whole point of that is you recognize that portfolios today still have to meet the vision of the organization. If the organizational goals are set for the new fiscal year and you say this is what we need to go do, obviously the portfolio manager needs to track with that, right? I need to create or adjust capability to go do that thing. However, on a sustainment and as a vector to become more agile, because that's kind of the nature of today's podcast, I need to be more agile. How do I get there, right? How do I bring greater value to the portfolio that I'm responsible for? So ARIS, it's agile, resilient, efficient, and secure, right? ARES. So agile, right? Can I respond? What does agile really mean? So can I respond to rapid demand for capability with developed products in days and weeks and not months and years at the speed of need? That's one of those scenarios where if you're at your utopian state, I have platform as a service. I have components which are capabilities that are buildable like Legos that I can put together to create almost instant capability
Mm-hmm.
based upon that bucket of Legos that I have that are all modular and containerized capabilities.
So you want to be able to I'm going to grab a little bit of this. I'm going to grab a little bit of this. I'm going to add a little new here and then create something new really fast to get it to market or to get it to my users. I mean, I think that's really the ideal state.
And just think if you take that even further, as system developers, that's a great scenario, right? Take it to the furthest effect. Now with AI that is now enabling people with lesser experience, that's probably the best way to put it, lesser experience in developing systems, to be able to create systems based on an AI, code assist. So coming into reality over the horizon now is this citizen developer. If we've created this ecosystem that people can access and a platform to build it in and the AI tools to assist, I won't say almost anyone, but people at the point of need can then potentially create quick little widgets to do things that they need. And then as a cyber defense activity, you could kill that and create it new somewhere else almost instantaneously. But it all has to be built on that service-oriented architecture, right? What do I know within my portfolio? What are the common functions across my
Mm-hmm.
portfolio that I can now modularize and build once, use many?
So resilient, are we talking security wise? Are we talking sustainability? Like what does that mean?
Yes,
Like,
and yes, really. Well, the S for an ARIS is for secure, but the R being for resilient is if I do have a moment where I've been attacked and I've been compromised and this app is now at risk, can I just recreate that somewhere? Because I have all the components, I have all the blueprints,
Right.
Now, can I just quickly recreate that somewhere else? And I can, right? Can I reconstitute an application rapidly as a cyber defense activity? You can, and that's kind of a piece that's overlooked.
That reminds me of a while back reading about some development teams where sometimes they would go in with the approach building something new and making sure that if they ever deployed something that they weren't happy with or went wonky, that they could immediately revert that and get back to the previous state. And I think the key there is you plan for that from the beginning, and you're going to do different things as you build the infrastructure and as you build the system that enable that to happen. So I think that's kind of cool on it. That would be really neat if we could actually get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, you think about those back out points, and if you can componentize those and modularize, and you can make those available in the enterprise, yeah, you're on top of things. Efficient, right? Let's talk about efficiencies. That's what you were trying to drive towards in when you were doing your portfolio days. What
So
was the
true.
whole purpose of you trying to go get that information
Right.
from everyone?
You don't need three things that do the same thing, right? I don't need, three different components that I'm paying for that are actually doing the same thing. So you want to get down to maybe one that you can leverage whenever you need that particular capability, pull that in, and you've got one that works across your enterprise and not three or more that you're paying for. That's how I think about it.
It's funny because as we talk about these things, we make it sound so simple, right? Because
So not.
those, exactly, and those capabilities are so interwoven in these large monolithic systems. One, you probably don't recognize you have a similar component to the other
Right.
large monolithic system sitting next to you. Uh, and so any program manager and especially a portfolio manager, how are you ever going to know what you have as commonality across your enterprise? The goal here that we're talking about of being efficient is absolutely true and absolutely correct. But how do you know?
I think efficiency also goes to like supportability. How easy is it to support? How many resources does it take? You really want to minimize those expenditures as you want to put your money into new capability development, not sustaining and maintaining the old clunky things. So,
The hidden costs of tech debt, right? And there's
mhm,
lots of articles and stuff
for
written
sure.
on that. Just think about if you have antiquated code, how hard is it to find a resource who can sustain that code for you? Code that's kind of been abandoned 20 years ago, but it's still resident in your system. One,
Right.
trying to find a person who can do it, and what's the cost?
Oh, right. I ran a project a couple of years ago where they had this, it was just working for a bank, and they had this old Visual Basic 6 code, and we brought in two very skilled developers, but they had to basically relearn that technology. And by the way, there was nobody around who even really knew how the system worked. So we had to reverse engineer everything and figure out what different parts of the code did. And holy cow, if we had had some of these AI tools back then, that would have taken maybe a quarter of the time to rewrite the whole application, because it wasn't that complicated. It was just all those other factors that made it a lot more expensive and a lot more work to do what we needed to do with it.
I don't think it translates with a lot of organizations that when they have situations like you just described, what risk does that put you in, right?
Right. I mean, it was like a critical system for the bank. And that was one of the reasons they wanted it modernized. But, had that gone down before we were done with it, that would have been a pretty big hit to their capability.
Yeah,
So, all right. And the last one is secure, which we kind of touched on a little bit, right?
we have the one piece to that though is as you create these modules, so you kind of get the gold standard, right? If you once you put the time and effort to look across your portfolio, when you see what commonality you have, when you see that you can gain efficiencies by creating something once, using it many, and it's the same mentality with data, but create once, use many. It's the same thing, but In this particular case, you're building something to a gold standard that passes all your security checks. It passes, I mean, you can run that through the security check ringer, and you know it's hardened, it's good, it's resilient, it's all of these wonderful things. Just think of how good that is now to be able to use that gold standard across your enterprise.
Yeah. How does zero trust play into like the ideal portfolio?
So that would definitely be an aspect of one of the aspects of zero trust, ensuring that on the machine piece, in the machine piece, were you able to ensure that the code, the systems, etc., are all resilient and access to those? So as you get into that scalable access of people and systems to data and information, I mean, it's a big Venn diagram, significantly, with a lot of great
Mhm.
factors to it. But if you're able to build things and detect intrusions, if you're able to kind of foolproof the code, make it scalable, which is going to cause rewrite of code to be compliant and really embrace zero trust. Now you're looking at, again, I have a gold standard that I can now reproduce throughout my enterprise.
I'm curious if you have any stories about legacy portfolios that you've heard about or customers you've worked with. That would be interesting to hear one of those.
It was interesting because this whole concept of coming up with, and you were at this conference with me, so you remember this story. Uh, we were talking to an acquisition specialist, and we talked about how this whole concept of common services, and whether it's common data, whether it's common services, it gets shared across the portfolio. The answer back was, "Oh, I don't think we can do that, because that's that's going to be a problem. We let our contracts for these systems, and we can't force our contractors to now share across or use someone else's things. That's going to be an acquisition
Right.
challenge."
Right. And I think there are ways the government can get around that, because at the end of the day, most of the time the government owns that code. And so I think I think they're trying to come up with new ways of acquisition and new ways to approach those problems. But I guess that leads me to a really good question of like, so great, we've explained this, the four attributes of a great portfolio, but it's not that easy. And how do you get there?
Cultural resistance, right?
How, is a lot, yeah, there's a lot more than technology in your way there, but even just technologically speaking, how do you get there? Where do you start? And I know I'm probably leading us into next episode a little bit, but just maybe you could summarize that quickly for us.
So there is AI is your friend. I know there's a lot of people who are afraid of AI, and if it's not done well and if it's not governed, absolutely, transparent AI is important. However, don't run from it, because it is the great advantage, right? There are some capabilities we've discovered. We'll talk about those in the next episode, where AI does give you the data you're looking for. It's an unbiased look at system by system by system within your portfolio, and it's going to give that portfolio manager the blueprints and the makings of their vector for what systems will we retire, what systems will we refactor, what's the 5 R's. And I
Right,
am delving into next episode, but at the same time, the savior is here, and it's called an AI based capability. This is all very daunting if you just rely upon humans and architectures and
right,
people talking to one another, people giving up their fiefdoms and all of these things. Incredibly challenging. But if you can logically and in an unbiased way put the data out there that says this is what you should do because I've looked at the code for you,
right.
golden.
I wish I would have had that when I was doing portfolio management. That would have made life so much easier. I guess that's why I'm so excited to talk about this stuff, because I just know what a game changer it would have been 10 years ago. And I'm super excited to bring that to customers we know that are struggling with this right now. So
Yeah,
anything
I mean,
else we should touch
well, in
on?
the end, in the end, we've talked about efficiency. Just think, as you look through these multi-million-dollar systems a lot of organizations have, and if you can start to whittle down the many different aspects that you have to keep, these many different aspects that you're having to sustain, and you can really streamline things on multi-million-dollar systems. Just it's almost like I would pay almost anything for a capability to help me do that, because the longevity of those returns, that return of investment, is going to be significant.
Exactly. That's why we're so excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think that wraps up this episode and leads us into the very next one. So I would say stay tuned, share this with your friends, and even if you just want to make fun of us, that's okay. Share it around as well.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, this is the podcast you have to listen to.
Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Bye.